Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Guys, can you just unmute your mic and let me know? Is it audible? Barnali ma'am, are you there?
Yes, you are
Uh,
very much audible to me.
okay. So, guys, as you know, today would be your first session on verbal and soft skill, and you would be mentored by none other than Barnali Roy Chaudhary. You have attended one session with her. So, I mean, I'm leaving you guys with Barnali ma'am. There is nothing to speak much about her. You already know. So, ma'am, you can take over now.
Thank you, Victor.
Ma'am, others will keep joining. So, you start your session.
Okay, so who will admit them? I guess you will be throughout
I'll
the
admit
sessions.
them.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll admit.
thank you so much, Victor. So, a very good morning to all of you who are on the other side of the screen. And I just hope you are doing exceedingly well. Um, I guess the last time we met, it was about a couple of months back. So the situation was different at that point of time, but now thankfully situation has improved on several fronts. So in what fronts, I'll let you know. See, at other times we wouldn't have met across this interface, but rather we would have met face to face, because in all my previous years, the months of May and the months of June and July, they have always been very hectic months for all of us, because the campus recruitments usually start from the month of June or July. So most of the campus to corporate programs are conducted by the colleges sometime around the middle of, it starts around the middle of May and continues till the end of July. This time around, the situation is a bit different, because the whole world is going through a churn, a phase of turmoil, and luckily we have survived. We have managed to sail through this churning phase. So, but we have challenges in hand, yes. So I'll let you know what kind of challenges we are about to face in the coming days. So 3 months back, there was a lot of apprehension. There was a lot of apprehension amongst the education, the circle of the educationists, institutional circles and the HR circles, that maybe this year we will not get to see campus recruitments, or campus recruitments would be frozen, so on and so forth. But thankfully, we have been able to set all those apprehensions at rest, because economies have started to open up slowly and gradually. So yes, we are going to see campus recruitments. I can vouch for that. I can say for sure that we are going to witness campus recruitments. Maybe, yes, the number of companies who will come down to the campuses will not be as many as we used to have in the previous years. And yes, there will be a significant reduction in the intake also, but then we are going to have for sure. But it has also been pushed back by a couple of months, because earlier on we used to have these campus from the middle of June, but now I guess we are going to have it September onwards. It could be pushed back by a little further, but yes, we are going to have. So let us utilize this 2.5 months to sharpen our saws, prepare ourselves, and let's embark on the journey of learning. So let me also talk about the new modalities of recruitments that we are going to witness in the coming months. The modalities, new modalities in the new world order, because henceforth, or I wouldn't say henceforth, at least for this year, we are going to have recruitments on the digital platform. So just as the training and the learning scenario has changed due to the situation, the current scenario, so the recruitment scenario has also changed. We'll also be seeing a paradigm shift. So we are going to have virtual recruitments. Now, what would be the modalities of the recruitment? We do not have a very clear and transparent picture on that, but we do have a blueprint. So we do have some semblance of a hazy picture as to how the modalities are going to be like. So yes, recruitments are going to be conducted like previous years in different rounds. So there's going to be a round one comprising the initial screening, the aptitude test, followed by, if it's an IT organization, you're going to have the coding round. The final round, that is the HR interview round, is going to see some changes. So in the virtual interview round, earlier the parameters used to be a bit different. So we used to train our candidates on interview etiquettes, that is face-to-face interview etiquettes. So, you know, how to conduct yourself in a face-to-face interview situations. But this time it's going to be in the virtual mode. So we have to train you up on that. Especially, we need to work on the virtual screen presence and what sort of virtual etiquettes we need to follow, we need to maintain during a virtual interview. And also previously there would be a lot of focus on CV writing. Yes, I am going to teach you CV writing for sure, but in addition to that, because we are going to have a few additional things this time round, keeping in mind the scenarios, so we have also introduced the video CV. So how to give how to shoot a very short video of yourself, where you would be speaking of all your achievements and academic credentials in a short video of not more than 2 minutes length. So that is called a video resume or a video CV. That's your video profile. So once you have created your video profile, you can upload that to any of the the channels for viewership, so that more and more recruiters can have access to your video profile. They know who you are. So I guess one way it's good for you, because then you have a far greater outreach. You can reach out to more and more recruiters. So apart from on campus, you will also have a lot of off campus calls. So that's the best part of it. So these are the changes that we have incorporated in our program. Otherwise, the program is more or less similar to what we used to have in the previous years, especially as far as the verbal section is concerned. As far as the GD round is concerned, maybe this time round we may not have GD, and the GD is likely to be replaced with extempore. That is a jam session or a 1 minute off the cuff speech on a topic, on a given topic. So these are the few changes which organizations are seeking to incorporate, keeping in mind the change scenario. So let us start with today's session. And I will be taking you through the entire verbal aptitude session. It's going to be a 20-hour program, of which 18 hours we are going to devote to theory, and 2 hours you will have mock tests. So you will have a total of 2 mock tests of 1 hour each on all the different sections of verbal ability. Now, speaking of the sections of verbal ability and what verbal ability actually tests. Verbal ability is a test of your basic knowledge and understanding, or rather working knowledge of the language English, because English happens to be a global language. It's a global lingua franca. It's a language that binds all the different, the population of the world. It's a language that binds all the population of the world, and especially in India, because India is a vast nation and so many different regional languages are spoken across India, but it's English that binds the entire nation together. And it's also the official language. It's a language which is used for all kinds of official communication, especially written communication. I'm not focusing so much on oral communication, because in case of oral communication, we do make use of our regional languages to a great extent, but when it comes to written communication, we still bank heavily on English. So yes, we need to fine tune our written communication skills. So verbal ability is a test of your basic knowledge of grammar, because grammar and sentence construction is essential when it comes to written communication. In oral communication, we can sometimes, take a leeway. So we can sometimes be a little lenient with the grammar and the construction part, but when it comes to written communication, we have to be absolutely impeccable and meticulous. So that is the reason we need to have knowledge of basic English functional grammar. And this is exactly what a test, an aptitude test on verbal ability tests or assesses. Okay. Now, a question on verbal ability, it is divided into several sections, and it varies from organization to organization. So let me tell you one thing, that this program, this 20-hour program on verbal ability, it is going to be of a generic nature. So we are not going to conduct any company specific verbal ability course. The reason being that because we have a cross section of students coming from different universities, and you could be facing interviews from different organizations. So we have made it very generic. So it is not a CTS oriented or a TCS oriented or a Wipro oriented. It's very generic in nature. But yes, some organizations, they have, you know, their own tweaking. For example, some organizations focus more on reading comprehension, not so much on the other components, whereas there are organizations who do not have reading comprehension section at all. So they focus more on the grammar part, the tense part, direct, indirect speech, spotting the errors, so on and so forth. So we are going to take you through in details through most of the, or rather all of the sections that we can expect on a verbal ability question paper. So what are those sections? Number one that tops the list is the reading comprehension section. Now, reading comprehension is challenging and scoring simultaneously. If you know the strategies, if you know the skills and the techniques, then you can always overcome the challenges, and it could be a major scoring section for you. In some organizations, there is a 1/3 weightage on reading comprehension, whereas in other organizations, you know, they may do away with the reading comprehension section completely, or they may have very short passages, whereas in some organizations the passages are not only large, but they are also very complex to read, very complex to comprehend. So those things require the strategies, the skills and the techniques, because shorter passages, easier ones, you can manage yourself. You have the skills, you have the cognition, the ability. But larger passages, that is where you need to put your skills to test, your skills and techniques to test. Other than that, you have para jumbles, so it's another challenging section, but again, there are a few techniques that we can always follow, which makes our task easy. We have closed passage, closed test, that is gap fillers. So there is a passage and certain portions of the passage are blank, so you have to fill in with appropriate words from the given list. Apart from that, you have questions from vocabulary, idioms, idiomatic expressions, synonyms, antonyms, so on and so forth. And there is another major section which is called spotting errors. So sentences will have errors in certain sections. You have to spot the errors. So basically, these are the common sections which most of the verbal ability papers, question papers, they have. Be it placement papers or going ahead, going forth. If you are planning to, you know, appear for CAT examinations, if you're planning for opting for CAT, if you wish to opt for CAT examinations, GMAT examinations, ZAT examinations, bank PO examinations, UPSC examinations. So this is basically the pattern. Okay, so my job is to familiarize you with the patterns and also teach you some of the skills and techniques as to how to crack these different sections. So today's session is going to be on reading comprehension, and I'm sure this section will actually continue, because I don't think reading comprehension is a vast section. There are so many things to be discussed, so many things which you need to practice yourself, some in front of me and some at home. I'll give you practice sets for home practice. So it's a vast section. If I'm not able to cover it today, so there will be a rollover to the next session, which is going to be next week. So without any further delay, let's start with reading comprehension. There is one more thing. We have three of our friends who have actually officially enrolled for today's session, not only for today's session, but for the entire verbal ability program: Aditya, Neha and Kishalay. So apart from these three friends, we also have other friends who are attending today's session. So this session is actually an open for all session, but however, yes, there will be a few things, additional kitty for the three registered students. And the additional kitty lies in the fact that after my theory, after I take you through the theory, there will be 3 practice papers or 3 samples. So those 3 samples are for them to work out in front of me, so that I can be assured that yes, the theory has gone down well with you. So those are for the registered students. And for other students, attend this program, try to take the key, try to go with the flow, and try to take down the key points, take down the notes, the important points. I'm sure there are going to be some very important takeaways for you. Towards the end of today's session, for the last 10 minutes, I'm going to throw this session open for question answer. So that is open for all. Anybody can ask questions or get your doubts clarified from today's session. So I just hope I'm clear. Any question to ask? If yes, please put it down in the chat box, because I'm going to move over to the reading comprehension without any further delay. I have to take you through the different tips and techniques before we move on to the practice set, the practice sample. So any questions from anyone, any doubts, anything that you need to get clarified? If not, then I'm moving on. Okay, thank you so much. So let's move on. If it is not visible to anyone, please let me know. I guess it's visible to all of you, but if it's not visible to anyone, please let me know. No, I guess it's visible to everyone. Okay, moving forward. So today's agenda in reading comprehension, we are going to talk about, or we are going to explore that what exactly is reading comprehension all about, and what does it assess? What sort of aptitude, what sort of skills they assess? Just a moment. You could have asked this question towards the end. Yes, there is going to be a session on GD as well, but not today. Not today. Today's session is going to be entirely on reading comprehension. So we are going to talk about what does it assess, what sort of aptitude skills does it assess. Then we are going to talk about speed reading techniques, because the thing is that anybody can answer, even a class 7 or an 8th standard student can answer questions on reading comprehension. If I give them a reading comprehension passage and ask them a few questions, they will be able to answer. Only difference is that they will take 10 minutes to answer 5 questions, but you don't have all the time in the hand, because this aptitude section, be it quantitative aptitude, logical reasoning, or verbal aptitude, this aptitude section is entirely about time management and strategizing. It is about racing against time. So you have to answer within a stipulated time by managing your time well, by time optimization, and by employing or enforcing strategies. So I guess you don't have all that time. The time which a 7th or an 8th standard student has to answer questions, you don't have that time. So you need to employ something which is called speed reading techniques. Speed reading techniques means anything more than 300 words per minute. Actually that. So it's more than 300 words per minute. Okay. Compressing a large piece of information. Now we do not know as of now as to what kind of comprehension passage you are going to get in your aptitude test. They could be very short passage, or they could be large ones, a passage divided into 3 or 4 paragraphs. So whenever you have a large passage and the time is less than 5 minutes, you need to employ a technique called compressing a large piece of information, or compressing a passage, which means you have to cut it down to 70%. I'm sorry, you have to knock off that 70% and cut it down to 25 to 30% of its total length. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible for you to answer. So you have to cut it down, comprehend the gist, comprehend the crux. That is the central, the underlying theme of the passage, and then answer questions. And finally, the step-by-step procedure for cracking the RC section. So these are the things that we are going to explore today. Just a moment. Okay. Okay. So basically, this is something which I have discussed earlier, that is assesses a person's ability to read, comprehend, and process written information quickly. Why do they have the written comprehension section? The reason being that when you join a workforce, at least, if not more, what I'm saying is at least 30% to 40% of your job would entail going through emails and answering emails. So basically, it would be about written communication, and those are routine work. Now, once you scale up, once you go higher up the ladder, higher up in the hierarchy, so from an executive level, when you scale up to the position of a manager, or you scale up to the position of a leader, your routine work has to come down, because otherwise you will not have time for planning and strategizing. For a manager, for a leader, planning and strategizing should comprise 80% of your job. Planning, strategizing, supervising others, mentoring, these should be your core areas. These should be your key result areas. However, if you get tied down with routine work, if at that point of time also you have to spend 30 to 40% of your time in reading and going through mails, it means that you are not practicing effective time management. You still have to go through mails, you still have to answer mails. So basically what you need to do is you need to take the crux and you need to work on the crux, which means scheming out the central or the underlying theme and then working on those. So you need to employ speed reading techniques, and you need to be able to read, understand, analyze, and process large piece of information within a very short time. So passage reading is not just about understanding, processing, and analyze information. It is also about your ability to understand the central theme of the passage, the context in which the passage is being written, the tone of the author, and also the mood of the author. Tenor means the mood of the author. So basically, you are doing all of these things simultaneously: reading, understanding, analyzing, processing, understanding the mood of the author, the tone of the author, and also the context, the surrounding context in which the author may have penned it down. So that is what reading comprehension is all about. So what are the different types of passages that you may get? One is factual. So factual passages are very easy to understand, and they're also easy to answer, because the questions would be mostly based on data and statistics. So factual passages will have lots of data, lots of statistics, numbers, names of places, and so on and so forth. Factual passages are objective in nature. Objective means the author will not put across his or her own views and opinions. The author will just put across the bare facts. So these are comparatively easier ones to understand, process. There is nothing much to analyze. There is nothing much to understand about the mood of the author or the tone of the passage, because the tone is very, very objective. Then comes the narrative passages. The narrative or the descriptive passages, they describe a process or an event. So that's a narration. It's like a story. It's kind of storytelling. So it is partly factual, but part of it will also have the author's subjectivity. That is the author's own views and opinions. Then you have argumentative or persuasive passages. So argumentative or persuasive passage means that the author is trying to convince you of something. So the author will put across some facts. Along with that, the author will put across his own arguments and then convince you of something. So here the tone might be a little critical, the tone might be a little sarcastic or a witty, and yes, it is subjective in nature. Subjective means the author's own views comes to the fore. And then you have analytical passages. Most of the newspaper reports that you get to see, most of the articles, especially the political articles or the editorial columns, I don't know how much you are into reading, but I would suggest that if you are indeed looking forward to take competitive examinations in future, you should get into the habit of reading newspapers every day. This will not only help you build up your vocabulary, but it will also help you understand the different kinds of tone and tenor which a writing may have. So read articles, the reports, and also the editorials. Now, editorials are argumentative and persuasive in nature. They are also analytical in nature. Analytical means they will take one event or situation and then they will tell you why it has taken place, how it has taken place, and what could be the solution. So that is analysis, a detailed study from different angles of a situation or an event. So these are the different kinds of passages that you may get to have. So let us now first understand what kind of questions are usually asked from comprehension passages. There are questions on the central theme of the passage. Now let me tell you one thing. The central theme of a passage may be implicit or it could be explicit. Explicit means it is categorically mentioned in at least one of the sentences of the passage, and it could be sometimes more, because central theme is also called the recurring theme. So recurring theme means it will come back again and again in the passage. So any sentence which comes back again in the passage, maybe not in exactly the same form, but in different forms, meaning is the same, only the structure is different, then you will know that this is the central theme of the passage. So if it's a repetitive concept, then that concept happens to be the central theme. There could be some inferential questions and some contextual questions. Contextual questions means questions that are directly from the passage. So answers are directly provided in the passage. For inferential questions, you have to read between the lines. So read between the lines means you have to understand those things which are not categorically mentioned in the passage, but you can always infer. For example, I'm just give you an example of how to infer conclusions. Let us have a sentence that the Jan Lokpal Bill was passed to check spread of corruption in India. Okay, let us have a sentence like this. I repeat, the Jan Lokpal Bill has been passed to check the spread of corruption in India. Now, this is a sentence which talks about the Jan Lokpal Bill and what is its purpose or objective. Now, I put across a statement. India is a country which has corruption. That's a statement. Now, nowhere it has been mentioned categorically that India is a country which is ridden with corruption. But you can directly infer this from the passage, because otherwise the Jan Lokpal Bill would not have been tabled. It has been tabled in the assembly because India is ridden with corruption, and because there is corruption, there is a need to check its spread. So these are called inferential questions. The answers are not directly provided, but you can always directly infer from whatever is given in the passage. Then there are vocabulary-based questions. Vocabulary-based questions means questions on synonyms and antonyms. That is, words which are similar in meaning and words which are opposite in meaning. So please read the question carefully, whether they're asking for synonyms or whether they're asking for antonyms. Now, let me put across a word of caution. Any word in isolation has got no meaning at all. For example, hang, H-A-N-G, hang. this word doesn't have any meaning. It will only derive its meaning when it is used in a sentence, when it is used in a context. So a word derives its meaning only when it is used in a context. Otherwise, the word doesn't have a meaning. So the court has decided to hang the criminal. Here, hang means something. Let me get a hang of the matter. Here, hang means something else. Let me get a hang of the matter means let me get a drift of the matter, or let me understand what the matter is all about. So the same word can have different meanings when the context changes. So vocabulary based question means you have to understand the meaning from the context, the contextual meaning as it has been used in the passage. Then there are questions on tone and attitude, that what is the tone of the passage, what is the attitude of the author, is the author optimistic or is the author pessimistic? That is the author looking forward to a bright future, is talking about a bright future, or is the author talking about a glim or a dark future? So that's about tone and attitude. And there could also be questions about arguments and conclusions. For example, certainty and probability. Which statement certainly follows? Which statement certainly follows from the information provided in the passage? So I will talk about certainty and probability later on as we proceed. Okay. Before we start with this section, just a moment. Before we start with this slide, before we start discussion on this slide, I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Think and put in your chat box what are the techniques that you have been taught in your schools by your teacher to practice during reading comprehension. What sort of reading principles, reading techniques have you been taught in schools for answering questions on reading comprehension? 20 seconds. I want you to put it in the chat box. Hurry up. Start working. This is open for all. What sort of techniques have you been taught in schools to answer questions from reading comprehension? Reading principles, how to read, how to go through passages. Quickly, 20 seconds. I want you to fill the chat box. Okay. Great. This comes from Kishaloy. I want more. Come on, hurry up. Okay. Great. Okay. So we have finding keywords from questions and then find them in the passage. We have underlined the points while reading the passage. Yes, Sanjukta. We have important words that describe, match the words from question to the passage. First, we read the questions, then we read the comprehension. Okay, so these are the different techniques and strategies that you have been taught in schools. Very good. So you are a way ahead from your peers. Okay, Saloni, first read question to get an idea of the passage and then read the passage and underline the main points. Yes, so two of you have actually stressed on underlining the main points, which actually means that you need to have a pen in handy. So you cannot be attending a comprehension test without having a marker or a pen in handy. This is really, really important. Yes, you have been taught all the right things in your school. Great. Right. So let us move on. Now, when they teach you reading principles in schools, it is done with a different objective. It is done with a completely different objective. School days, they are the time when your cognitive skills and abilities, they are gradually growing. So you are growing in your cognitive skills and ability. So those are the growing periods, the growth time. And that is why the teachers, they want you to make the most of it. So reading comprehension, it is not just about building up, it's not just about comprehending, understanding, analyzing and processing information, but it is also about vocabulary and pronunciation, to be precise. Vocabulary, spelling and pronunciation. So I remember when I was in school, we had reading comprehension passages from as early as class 3, third standard. We had reading comprehension passages in both English and a mother tongue. So we were told that when you are reading a passage, you have to read all the words. So focus on each and every word and try to, pronounce those words in your brain. And sometimes we were told to read the passage aloud. Read the passage aloud. So as we read, we also have to speak out. And later on, that was in the third, fourth and fifth standard. So when we were in highest classes, when we were in high schools, we were told that don't read it aloud, because that way you will be disturbing your neighbor who is sitting next to you. So read it quietly, but as you read, you need to pronounce the words. You need to, utter those words in your mind, in your brain, and don't miss out on any word. Read each and every word. So these things we were taught in schools, because that was the developmental stage, that was the developmental phase. So we were building on our repertoire of words, we were building on our stock of words, we were actually learning to pronounce the words correctly. So that's the reason why these things were told. But when you have reached this stage, you have already developed cognitively. You already have a repertoire of words. You already know how to pronounce those words. And moreover, competitive exams, they are not so much about testing your knowledge of vocabulary. They are not so much about testing your knowledge of pronunciation. It's about whether you have understood the big picture. It's the big picture. It's not about the bits and pieces that go into the making of the big picture. The bits and pieces may be wrong, but if the big picture is okay, then you are through. So here we are looking into the big picture. We are looking into the speed reading techniques. Speed reading techniques is important because, as I said, we have a time crunch and we are racing against time. So how to read fast? When you are into speed reading techniques, there are two things that you need to be mindful of. One is you need to expand your peripheral vision. You know what a peripheral vision is? Any idea what a peripheral vision is? If yes, please put it across in the chat box. If any of you have any idea what is the meaning of a peripheral vision, please put it out in the chat box. Anybody? Or maybe if you wish, you can unmute yourself and speak over the microphone. You can unmute yourself and speak over the microphone if you know what a peripheral vision is.
Something like wider vision.
Yes, wider vision. Absolutely correct. So actually, when we are focusing our gaze on something, we are not just looking into it. We are also looking sideways. So we are looking into the right, what is in the right of us. We are looking into what is to the left of us. And that is called peripheral vision. All of us have peripheral vision. Unless there is a severe issue with your vision, if you have a vision problem, that is different. Otherwise, we are all naturally endowed with a peripheral vision. So it's not like a Arjun who is aiming at the eye of the fish. That is not peripheral vision, because Arjun at that point of time did not have or disbanded his peripheral vision because he was focusing only on the eye of the fish. But the other Pandavas and the Kauravas, they had the peripheral vision. So when they were asked that, what are you looking at? They came up with different answers. They said, I can look at this, I can look at that, which is true because they were looking sideways also. That is peripheral vision. So you have to expand your peripheral vision, number one, and it comes with practice. And number two is you need to have your pen or a marker in handy. That is number two. Now, there is a process of unlearning here. Whatever you have learned in your schools, you need to unlearn, and then only you will be able to relearn. That is, learn something new. So forget what you have been told in your schools that you have to read each and every word. No. Just take out or skim out a block. Block means a continuum of words, 3 or 4 words in continuum, that is a block. So don't focus on each and every word, focus on block of words. Now when I'm saying focus on block of words, there are some words which in terms of importance stand a little higher in the order than the other words, and those words are called key words. Now what are key words? There are two kinds of words. One, function words, and second, structure words. Nouns, adjectives, verbs, these are structure words because they convey the meaning of a sentence. Prepositions, conjunctions, articles, these are function words. They do not add any extra value to a sentence in terms of meaning. They are there just to make the sentence grammatical. If you knock off the articles from a sentence, if you knock off the auxiliary verbs from a sentence, auxiliary verbs are is, am, are, was, were, has, have, had. So if you knock off these auxiliary verbs from a sentence and if you just retain the main verb in a sentence, if you knock off the conjunctions and prepositions from a sentence, you will still get the meaning of the sentence because the nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, they provide the meaning. So when you are actually skimming out blocks of words, there also your eyes should be focusing on the key words because it's the key words that give you the crux of the meaning. Okay. Now, when you are reading a passage, two things go simultaneously, and these things happen at the subconscious level. So there are actually 3 layers of our brain. One is the conscious, because you are consciously aware that you are doing this, but there is something below the conscious which is called subconscious. So there are two activities that are actually going on at the subconscious level. One is skimming, the other one is scanning. What is skimming and what is scanning? Skimming is when you are actually taking out the keywords and leaving out, filtering out the rest. That is, you are skimming out the content words or the structure words, and you are skimming out the function words. That is called skimming. What is scanning? Scanning means looking for a particular piece of information. For example, we always suggest, and your school teachers have also been correct when they suggested that before you read a passage, you should always go through the questions first. When you go through the questions, you can expect what the passage is going to be all about. Sometimes after going through the questions itself, you will get a hang of the central theme of the passage. And number two is some of the questions, especially questions on vocabulary, can be answered even without going to the passage, at least when you are eliminating the options. So that makes your task easier, and that also leads to time optimization. That is, even before reading the passage, if you can eliminate 2 or 3 options from the given ones, then your job becomes easier, and these leads to optimization of time. Now, suppose you have gone through the questions before reading the passage, and in the question, there is a question like, where was Akbar born? Let's say, for example, where was Akbar born? So we all know that where, the question is where, therefore the answer should be name of a place. It cannot be a date, it cannot be a time, it should be the name of a place, a city, town, or village. So you have read that question before and it's there in your mind. So when you are reading the passage, you are actually looking for name of a place. That is scanning. That is called looking for a particular piece of information. So when you are reading a passage at the subconscious level, these two things go on simultaneously. Use markers to highlight keywords. This is really important, and this is also important for speed reading. You should always have a marker in your hand, so you are quickly circling or underlining the keywords. Okay. And sometimes what happens, peripheral vision is both a boon and a curse. It's a boon because peripheral vision allows you to absorb block of words, but it is a curse because when you have moved from one block to another block, you have a tendency to again go back to the previous block. So what you can do is you can also use something like your eraser, whatever, anything which is in handy, to cover the blocks, or maybe your hand, your other hand, fingers. Devise your own strategies to cover the blocks that you have already read. That way, you will not fall back into the tendency of going back to previous blocks. Otherwise, you are regressing. We want you to progress, not regress, because it's all about time optimization. The 7th point is really important. Avoid subvocalization. This is where you need to unlearn everything that you have been taught in your schools. Because in your schools, you have been taught that when you are reading the sentences, you also have to pronounce, you have to utter those sentences in your mind. Subvocalization, that is uttering the sentences, pronouncing the words in your mind, in your brain, is actually a major stumbling block to speed reading, because it is holding you back. Every time you're reading, you are repeating it in your mind. And every time you're repeating it, you're actually, regressing, going back. So this needs to be avoided. There is one technique, one or two techniques which you can apply, but I'm not sure whether it's going to work for you or not. But for some people that I have personally spoken to, it has worked for them. Number one is, you have to, engage your mind to some other thoughts when you are reading a comprehension passage. That way you need to multitask, because you're thinking of something and at the same time you are also focusing on the passage. It needs a lot of multitasking, that is dividing or distribution of your concentration. But that is the way in which you can stop subvocalization, at least initially. Another way in which you can stop subvocalization is by listening to music or listening to something else when you are reading a passage. Again, at least during the initial, the initial few days, till the time you have completely got rid of it. Because subvocalization, as I said, it's holding you back. And if you do not employ these speed reading techniques, then you will not be able to answer maximum questions in minimum time with maximum accuracy. It's about maximum number of questions in minimum number of time with maximum accuracy. Okay. So let's move on. Now, this part is really important because there is something which I need to talk about here. It is called Pareto principle. Pareto. Pareto principle, or it's called 80-20 principle. Now, what is an 80-20 principle? Let me give you a few examples of 80-20 principle. 80-20 principle is nothing but, if you look at business, any business, 80% of the revenue that a business generates actually comes from 20% of its customers, who are loyal customers. Then, in a school or in any institution, 80% of nuisance are caused by 20% of employees. In any organization, office, 80% of the problems are created by just about 20% of employees. 80% of corruption in India is due to 20% of officials. Not everybody is corrupt. So that is 80-20 principle. If we apply the same 80-20 principle to a comprehension passage, 80% of the questions are actually asked from 20% of the passage. So what about the remaining 80%? So if you have a passage of this size and this length, the questions are actually asked from this size or this length. So then my question is, why do they give you such large, complicated, complex passages? Just to confuse you, just to test your resilience, just to test your tenacity, just to test whether you are able to scheme out the crux. So there will be a lot of chaos and confusion around, but you need to keep yourself rooted to the ground and navigate your way through in the right direction after, keeping all those chaos at bay. So that is exactly what is being put to test. How to knock off 80% of the passage and how to retain that 20% crux, which actually enables you to answer 80% of the questions. So let us now go through those principles. And this is really, really important. Before we start with this, let me ask you a question. Do you all know and understand what is the difference between a phrase and a clause? Do you all know and understand what is the difference between a phrase and the clause? If there is anybody in the crowd who doesn't know the difference between a phrase and the clause, no harm, please let me know. First, I will clarify that doubt and then I will move on. Otherwise, it makes no sense. If there is anybody to whom the concept of a phrase and clause is clear, yes.
Ma'am, please clarify.
Okay, I will do that. So the difference between a phrase and the clause is, a clause will have a verb and a finite verb. A phrase will not have a finite verb. For example, I'm going to watch movie. This is a clause. Am going is the finite verb. A finite verb is a verb which has a tense, which changes with tense, which changes with number, and which changes with person. So I'm going to watch a movie today. If you change today to yesterday, then it will be I was watching a movie yesterday. So the verb changes. The verb changes its form. Similarly, instead of I, if you write we, then we are going to watch and not we am going to. So any verb which changes with tense, person, and number, these are called finite verbs. Clause will always have a finite verb. Without a finite verb, you cannot have a clause. Okay, let's have an example of a phrase. On the floor, in the desk, over there. All these are phrases. So phrases means block of words or its chunk of words which will not have a finite verb. Okay. So phrase is simply a block of words, whereas clause is a collection or a block of words in continuum with a finite verb. So all clauses are phrases, but all phrases are not clauses. Clear? Okay. Now, do you understand the difference between a simple sentence and a complex sentence? Again, this is a question I'm putting across to you because these things are really, really important. If you do not understand these basic things, then okay, you want me to explain? Great. Simple sentence will have only one finite verb, and complex sentence will have more than one finite verb. For example, I am going to the movie today. Although considering the current situation, it's not possible. I have not watched a movie for more than 4 months in a plex, of course. Anyway, still I'm giving this example so you can understand how nostalgic I'm feeling. So I'm going to watch a movie today. This is a simple sentence because this has got only one finite verb, and that is am going. Now, let us consider another sentence. Harish told me that he is going to watch a movie today. Now, this is a complex sentence because this has got two finite verbs. Harish told me, told is finite verb number one. Is going to watch a movie today, is going is finite verb number two. So, this is a complex sentence. That he is going to watch a movie today is the dependent clause, and Harish told me is the independent clause. Okay. So independent clause is that clause which can stand on its own. It can convey a meaning independently. Harish told me, full stop. That conveys a complete sense. That he's going to watch a movie today is a dependent clause because it cannot stand on its own. Can you have a sentence like this? That he went to watch, that he's going to watch a movie today. Can you have a sentence like this? No. So this is a dependent sentence. It is dependent on the main clause. So complex sentences will have two clauses. One is independent clause and the other is dependent clause. Dependent clauses are also called subordinate clauses. Now, is it clear, Kishalay? Kishalay, is it clear? Yes, is it clear, Kishalay? Okay. Yes. Dependent clause once more. Okay. There is some kind of a noise, so kindly again put it back to mute. Okay. Dependent clause. So, as I said, in a complex sentence, you have two finite verbs. So basically, it's a combination of two different sentences. Harish told me is sentence number one. That he is going to watch a movie today is sentence number two. Now look at these two sentences. One is Harish told me, and the other is that he is going to watch a movie today. Now, of these two sentences, which sentence do you think cannot stand independently in a sentence? It cannot form a sentence on its own. You cannot have a proper sentence. That he is going to watch a movie today, it is not a proper sentence. A sentence cannot begin with that. When a sentence begins with that, it means there is something before the sentence. So it is not a complete, proper, independent sentence. So those sentences, those clauses which cannot stand independently as a complete sentence are called dependent clauses. Harish told me is an independent sentence. It's an independent, simple sentence with one finite verb. It can stand alone. that he is going to watch a movie tonight is not independent. It is a clause, it has a finite verb, but it is not a proper sentence. So it is a dependent clause. So with this basic things in mind, with this basic concepts in mind, let us proceed. Now, when you are striking out, you should always, as I said, you should always have a pen in handy when you are answering questions from reading comprehension. So there are certain chunks, certain sections from a passage that you can simply knock off. How you knock off, it's entirely up to you. You can put a bracket, you can use a cross, you can underline. It means that this part is not so relevant. I'm not saying that you will not get questions from the knocked off portions. You might get one question or one or two odd questions from the knocked off portion. But at least for the initial understanding of a complex, a complicated passage, let us knock off those portions. Number one is subordinate dependent clauses that begin with that or which is important, which means that if you have a sentence like this, Harish told me that he is going to watch a movie tonight. That he is going to watch a movie tonight is important. That is important because this is where the crux of the information lies. Harish told me is not that important. So dependent, knock off, independent clause, retain, because the crux of the information lies there. That is number one rule or principle. Number two principle or rule is a relative phrase. Now, this is not a clause, this is a phrase. A relative phrase that begins with a relative pronoun like who, which, what, where, or when is not important and may be overlooked. Okay. I'm sure you all have a pen and a paper in handy, because when you are attending a session, it's must for you to have a pen and a paper in handy. If you are not having it in handy, well, I can't really help, but you should have it. Now, I'm uttering a sentence. Please write it down first, all of you. Reena, comma, who is 5 feet 11 inches tall. Reena, comma, who is 5 feet 11 inches tall, comma, has bagged the beauty contest. Has bagged the beauty contest. Okay, I'm sure you all have got it. Reena, comma, who is 5 feet 11 inches tall, comma, has bagged the beauty contest. Now, in this particular sentence, what is important is Reena has bagged the beauty contest. Who is 5 feet 11 inches tall is redundant here, because this particular phrase, it describes Reena. It actually says you more about Reena, but it's not important here. At least for the purpose of answering our 80% questions, it's not important. So you can simply strike it off because it is an adjective phrase. It's an adjective phrase describing Reena. But the crux of the information lies in the fact that Reena has won the beauty contest. So just strike it off and retain Reena has bagged the beauty contest. Clear? So that way you have to knock off chunks. Now the most important part. Sometimes we are fooled by the author. Sometimes we believe that the sentence, the starting sentence or the beginning sentence of the passage is actually the topic sentence. Topic sentence means the main theme of the passage. But these are called traps, because oftentimes what happens is the author speaks about an idea in the first two lines, and then he shifts his idea, he shifts his focus, he shifts his argument. This will not happen with factual reading comprehension passages. These things will not happen with factual passages, but these things more often than not happen with argumentative passages and analytical passages. They don't happen so much with narrative passages and factual passages. So be very careful. Just scan means you're looking for specific piece of information. So just be watchful of a few words, a few structure words like however, therefore, nonetheless, moreover, on the other hand, in addition to. These are also called connectors. Connectors means they connect two different ideas. So watch out for these connectors, because the moment you catch hold of a connector, you will know that there is a high possibility that the argument will shift its focus. The argument will shift, the author will shift or change his locus standi. So more often than not, what happens is you read the first two lines of a passage and you think, okay, so this is what the passage is going to be all about. Little realizing the fact that throughout the passage, towards the latter half of the passage, the author has actually gone ahead to negate his first two beliefs, his first two ideas. So he is actually speaking against the first two lines. And how do you know? Just be on the lookout for these words. Okay. No voices there. It's coming from Saloni. This is a question I'm asking to others. Is my voice audible? Keep tapping yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's a yes from others, which means, Saloni, there could be some issue at your end. So please check, because others are coming up with yes. So Saloni, please check. Okay. And number 4 principle is sentences with negative connotations may be overlooked. So there are some sentences which have positive connotations and some sentences which have, okay, thank you, Saloni. So there are some sentences which have positive connotation and some sentences which have negative connotation. Negative connotation means a sentence which is talking about something in the negative. It is not talking positively about an idea or a person or an event. It is talking about negatively. So it will have negative particles. For example, not, no. Okay. So sentences with negative connotations may be overlooked. That is, they may be overlooked or chunked off, knocked off for the time being. Also, if you have a sentence which starts with for example, then that is something which you can overlook, because for example means it is not the main argument. It's a supporting thing. So usually how a passage is formed, how a paragraph is formed, all paragraphs have one central theme. So there is one central theme, and then there are supporting arguments which build on that central theme, which actually revolve around that central theme. So they are either speak for the central theme or speak against the central theme. Okay, so any sentence which begins with for example or likewise, you know that these are supporting casts, not the main cast of the movie. So for the time being, they may be knocked off. When you employ these principles, you will find that what you are left with is just about 20 to 30% of the entire passage. And from that 20 to 30%, you will actually get the central theme or the underlying theme. So this makes your task easy. Okay. So now let me take you through some of the step-by-step procedure. That will be a pretty much recapitulation of what I have covered so far. So Number one is skim the central theme or the recurring idea, and this can be done by applying the speed reading techniques and by compressing the passage. Basically, we have learned two techniques. One is the speed reading technique, and the other one is compressing a large piece of information. So by employing either of these two or both these techniques, you can scheme for the central theme or the idea. Identify the supporting arguments that build up the main theme. Identify means you have to keep in mind that there are supporting ideas, but for the purpose of compressing the passage, you can knock them off. Identify the author's tone. Now, tone could be sarcastic. Sarcastic means there is humor, but it's a black humor, which means it's not funny. They're actually criticizing under the garb of humor. It could be curious. Curious means the author wants to know more. I wonder, I wish, and there are more questions. There are more, these kinds of questions like, what would happen? Have you ever thought? So asking questions to oneself. So that is curious. Curious as well as introspective. Introspective means you're looking inwards. There is a problem and you are asking yourself why the problem has arose. So that is introspective. Suggestive. Suggestive means the author is suggesting a few steps. So those would be full of advice. Next is very, very important. Focus on modal verbs for concepts like certainty and probability. You might get questions on what can be certainly derived from the passage. Which of the following conclusions can be certainly derived from the passage? For answering these questions, you have to understand what is certainty and what is probability. Certainty modals. Okay, you know what are modal verbs? This is another important question. What are modal verbs? I will tell you what are modal verbs. Can, could, shall, should, may, might, need, have to. All these are called modal auxiliary verbs. Now, these modal auxiliary verbs are used in a sentence to convey different moods of the speaker. If I say, I can swim, it means that I'm talking about my ability to swim. If I say, I could swim when I was a child, it means that in the past I had the ability, but now I don't have. So, modal auxiliary verbs are used to express different moods of the speaker. Must, should, these are modal auxiliary verbs. Must, should, have to. These are all modal auxiliary verbs that express certainty. May, might, can, all these modal auxiliary verbs, they express probability, but not certainty. So understand these differences and be on the lookout for these modal auxiliary verbs. Read the questions prior to reading the passage. I guess we all agree on this. We are all unanimous on this. The sixth technique you can apply to optimize time: answer questions on vocabulary first, followed by contextual questions, and followed by inferential questions. So this is absolutely my own understanding. You may differ with me or you may agree with me. The choice is yours, but this used to be my strategy for answering questions. Because questions on vocabulary, they take up least possible time. And there are at least 3 or 4 questions on vocabulary. So you get 3 or 4 marks straight after spending just about a few seconds. Contextual questions, they are directly from the context, directly from the passages, so can be answered. Inferential questions take up a lot of time. They are a little time consuming. So those should be answered last. So this was all about time optimization. Now it's time for action. Now, before time for action, because I have a few samples with me and I want to get it done by my students, But prior to that, I'm going to throw this session open for question answer round. So if you have doubts, please get them clarified now. If not possible today, then there will be a rollover, and next session we are going to begin with activities or exercises on reading comprehension. Whatever you have learned today in theory, you need to employ all those techniques into practice in the next session, next class, and attempt these samples. So now I'm throwing this session open for question answer. This is open for all. You can type your questions in the chat box, or if you feel like, you can unmute yourself and ask questions over the microphone, whichever you prefer.
Ma'am, there is one question from my side. I'm Kishle Bhattacharya.
Yes, Kishalai, go ahead.
Ma'am, you have emphasized on underlining and omit the block of the sentences. But for the last 3 months, I have been doing the examinations on the online platform. So how can I do that online?
Actually, there's a lot of mental activity that you have to do. This is possible only if it is a pen and paper test. However, in an online test, it's not possible. So online is, you have to go for that skimming. You have to just skim it out using your eyes, visual skimming. So it's visual skimming, and then put it in your mind. Max, what you can do is, you can't use your pen for underlining purpose, but you are always allowed to have a pen and a paper in handy. So whatever you have skimmed in, I'm not talking of what you have skimmed out, but I'm talking of what you have skimmed in, because what you have skimmed in is important, the crux. So what you have skimmed in, you can just put it down on a piece of paper. And again, when you are putting it down, you may devise your own shorthand techniques which you can understand. So for the last 3 months, this has been a major challenge. I can understand online you don't have those tools. Even if you have marker pens, even if you have the digital marker pens, you are not allowed to make any kind of editing changes to the questions. So yes, there is a lot of mental activity that you need to do, visual skimming, and writing down the skimmed portions, the skim blocks on a piece of paper.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, any other questions? Any other questions? You have both the options. You can type in the chat box, or you can ask. I'm waiting for the questions. Any further questions? Okay. So let's move on to the sample then. At least we can work out at least one sample today. We have time for that. Kishla is present. So is Aditya. Is Neha present?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Neha is also present. And this is going to be a sample which I would expect Aditya, Neha, and Kishaloy, all three of you to work out, including the other guests who are watching this. They can also try it out, but this is specifically for Aditya, Neha, and Kishaloy, those who have registered for this program. Not this one, this one. This is a sample in front of you. I will tell you what you have to do with this, what exactly you have to do with this. But first, let me know if it is visible to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. It's visible to you. Okay. So, what Aditya, Neha, and Kishalay have to do is, I'm going to give you just because it is online. Had it been offline, had it been a pen and paper, I would have given you just 2 minutes, but just because it is online, so I will give you not more than 3 minutes. In 3 minutes time, what exactly you have to do is, you have to do two things. You have to understand and let me know what is the central theme or the underlying theme of the passage in your own words. And number two, prior to that comes second. Prior to that, you have to compress this passage and you have to bring it down to at least 20 to 30% of its length, just to take out the crux, So for this entire activity, you get 3 minutes time. Get going. Now, the others may try it out. Two more minutes left. Okay, Sanjukta is done. Very good, Sanjukta. Okay, it's my mistake. Never mind.
Yes, ma'am, done.
Okay, you're done. Uh, just 1 minute left, so let the others also finish.
Do I need to write it in 20% or I just read it?
You just read it, but you have to take out the crux. So 20% actually means those portions where the crux of the information lies. Those portions where the crux of the information lies.
Yeah, right.
Okay, stop. Stop. Stop with your efforts. First and foremost, this is a passage which comprises 3 paragraphs, as you can see for yourself. Each paragraph dealing with one central idea. So basically, we need to work on two things simultaneously. One is, if you get a passage which has got more than one paragraph, if it comprises 3, 4, or 5 paragraphs, then basically we are dealing with 3, 4, or 5 central ideas, because each of these paragraphs, they talk about one idea. One paragraph deals with one idea. When you string together all these central ideas of all these paragraphs, what you get is actually the underlying theme. Okay, so there are two things that are happening hand in hand. Now, Kishaloy, since you were the first one to finish. This question is for you. If you cut down all the flap, all the additional unnecessary chunks from the passage and just retain the major chunks, the major crust, what are you left with? What are you left with?
I can't say it in precisely, but the main theme of the first passage is that how the climate change will impact the poverty. The second passage is how is it in India, the poverty level, and the third passage is how the developing countries and the other developing countries poverty levels are associated with India, something like that. Isn't?
Okay. Okay, I'll come to that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. So next I'll move on to Neha. Neha, what is your take? What is the central theme of the first paragraph? What is the central theme of the second paragraph? What is the central theme of the third paragraph?
Ma'am, in first paragraph, they are saying about the author is saying about climate change and poverty that India is facing, and in second paragraph, he give us some data about 22% of the population in 2011 and 12, and this data I think it is essential for us. And in third paragraph, he is telling about the welfare economists and other philosophers who are uh, meaning contributes in the society for overcoming the poverty.
Okay. Aditya, what is your take on this? Okay, Aditya prefers to write instead of speak, but Aditya, we would all love to hear your voice, unless you have a sore throat. Unless you have a sore throat, please speak. Of course, he has privately messaged me that the first paragraph is about how climate change affects poor people. First paragraph. Okay. Okay, today there is a microphone problem. Let's just hope the problem doesn't stay in the next class. Okay. I will tell you what, the first paragraph is certainly not about climate change. This is a conundrum faced by policymakers in India and other developing countries. How will future climate change affect the poor, and how one addresses both poverty and climate change? So the crux of the first paragraph is how to balance sustainable growth and development with poverty, alleviation of poverty. Because if there is growth and development in economy, if there is economic growth and development, obviously poverty will be alleviated. But since there is a climate thing that needs to be looked into, now keeping in mind the consequences of climate change, how can we ensure a sustainable growth so that hand in hand we can also alleviate poverty? So how to balance this two? That is the crux of the first paragraph. Now, second paragraph, there is a word nevertheless. Can you spot that word nevertheless?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Aditya and Kishale, I'm sure you could spot that nevertheless. And what did I tell you? I told you to be on the lookout for, keep an hawk's eye. Keep a hawk's eye for these connectors, because the moment you catch these connectors, you will know that what comes after this is really, really important. What comes after this is really, really important. So, this is certainly not about nutrition, health, and other living conditions. This is about the government of India, which continues to use income or consumption as a parameter or index of poverty. So in India, what is the index of poverty? The index of poverty is your income. So that is how poverty is measured in India. So that is important. What comes after nevertheless is important. What is being spoken before nevertheless is something else. But what is spoken after nevertheless is where the crux lies, because this is where the shift takes place. This is where the author actually pitches his central idea. So the author does the pitching very carefully and very consciously. He will not pitch it anywhere and everywhere. Okay, let us understand one thing. All of you, please focus on this. Let us understand one thing. When I'm going to convince somebody to buy my product, let us say I'm selling a product. When I'm convincing somebody to buy my product, I will not go straight away and ask people, see, my product is really, really good, you have to buy it. No. I will talk about other products in the market. I will talk about the merits and benefits of other products in the market. And then I will use this kind of a connector. However, nevertheless, all the other products that are available in the market are very expensive. Mine is cheap. So the crux lies in mine is cheap. That is the topic sentence. That is the central theme. That is exactly what I'm pitching. What I have said beforehand about the other products in the market, everybody knows. Shabai jane, everybody knows. So I'm not focusing on that. My focus is on my product, which comes cheap. So what comes after the connector is really important, because the crux of the matter lies there. Okay. And the third one is that in other countries, there are other indices or other parameters of assessing poverty, unlike India. So there are economies, there are developmental economics who have focused on other indices of assessing poverty. So basically, it's divided into three para. The first para talks about balancing economic growth with climate change. Second para talks about how poverty is assessed in India. And third para talks about a contrast as to how poverty is assessed in other parts of the world. Okay, clear? Is it clear, Kishaloy, Neha and Aditya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes. So as others do not have a question and it's almost time, so let me pull down the curtains on today's section. Next session we are going to have on Monday. And Monday, at what time would you prefer to have your session? I'm asking this.
Ma'am, just a second. Sorry to interrupt.
Hmm.
Ma'am, your session, as you said now, so I was thinking of keeping it on Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday.
Okay, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday,
Sorry,
Saturday?
Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday.
Okay, fine. Okay, let me also chip in here. Next week will have sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays as usual, but Saturday it wouldn't be possible. So again, it'll roll over next week. So next week we are going to have classes only on Tuesday and Thursday, but henceforth we'll have classes on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Is this clear? Okay,
Yes.
so next Tuesday, let me also lay down the roadmap for the next session. Next Tuesday, we are going to start with reading comprehension. First 5 or 10 minutes, we'll continue with reading comprehension. And then we'll start with something else. Most likely, we'll do parajumbles or closed test. I have to decide either of the two. And number two is you will get a PDF copy of today's session in your mailbox. I have your mail IDs, the registered students, so you will get the PDF copies in your mailbox. Along with that PDF, you will also receive a practice set on reading comprehension. Now, let me tell you, you're not kids, you're not school students, so I can obviously rely on you. You're all grown-up adults. So I would expect you, I'm not forcing you, but I would definitely expect you to answer questions from that reading comprehension passage when you come for the next class, so that we can have a discussion on that. Okay, so is it clear? So you're going to receive two things from me. You're going to receive a PDF of today's session, and you're also going to receive a practice set on reading comprehension. I would expect you to work out the practice set for tomorrow, for the next week session, so that we can have a discussion on that. So first few minutes we'll dedicate to reading comprehension. As I said, this is a scoring and challenging session, so we are going to dedicate to reading comprehension and fine tune if there are any rough edges, and then we will move on to either parajumbles or closed test. So on that note, I guess we can call it a day. Okay. So Victor, if you have any closing.
No, nothing. Just as usual, you will get the recording link. Okay. So I'll post the recording link.
Okay, so thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you in the next class next Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Okay.
Just a second.
Ah,
Guys, you have two session today on in An Academy. You know that. So today both the session will be on in An Academy at 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. All right, ma'am. That's it from my side. Can you call it a day?
yes, we can call it a day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next week. Bye.